Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming to another episode of Off Script with Pastor Jared.
And the ironic blessing.
Aaron, the intern, back with
now.
me again. I have a question for you, Aaron. You ready?
Yeah.
I'm going at it right from the beginning.
Okay. Wow.
How much weekly programming from a church do you think you need to be a healthy Christian and not to be backsliding and not to be left out to dry as a sheep without a shepherd, wandering in the wilderness with no direction or guidance or feeding? Go ahead.
Needed to be a healthy Christian?
Yeah. What do you think?
I think needed, I would probably go just once if you came on a Sunday morning. I think you can be a healthy Christian and come to church at least semi-often. I believe you'll be helped, hopefully, and pushed and edified and grown to become even more of a healthy Christian if you came more often. But I would say needed, you at least need to gather every now and then with your local church.
All right. So I'm hearing your minimalist approach is you got to have one. That's more of like a what do you have to have or else you're in disobedience.
Yeah. Right? What I would personally say is
what's going to make you the best you can be, the best version you can be?
I think church members should at least gather maybe 2 or 3 times a week.
All right. So I've always said you've obviously got to have your Lord's Day gathering. You got to have your once a week. This is my church and we're all welcome. This isn't a one segment of the church gathering. You got to have that. I think you need to have at least one Bible study where you're with people. It can be peers. It doesn't have to be, but that can be your age graded thing where you're sort of sharing. I think it's good to have a dedicated prayer time that's not necessarily making your other services bear the full burden of dealing with all the prayer that you could be doing as a church. And then, I think some opportunity for fellowship is good. So that's 3-4 touches a week in some various format. Now here's my follow-up question to that.
Okay.
Are you familiar with diminishing returns? I think I've referenced this recently. So
I took economics once upon a time.
Okay. So for the listeners at home out in radio land, diminishing returns is when something starts as a good thing and you have a little bit of it and it's good, and then you have a little more of it and it's getting better, and the more you keep adding, the better it gets. But there's a point where adding more gets worse at a point. The example I always give is like eating cotton candy. It's first bite, great,
Amazing.
And then you may even eat the whole cotton candy roll from the circus or wherever you are, the fair. And then, but someone hands you a second roll of cotton candy.
I'm still going, but
okay,
I understand.
But 10 deep, it's too much, right? So you get sick. It's not good. That's called diminishing returns. So here's my question. You know where I'm going. Is there a point in church life in programming when there's a diminishing return where you're saying we're together too much, or we are meeting too much, or we're listening to too much preaching, or we're around each other too much?
I think I need to be careful.
I love the way that you think. I can see, you can't see this from the podcast, but this man's brain is going around the room right now.
I think I need to be careful on how I answer this, because do I think that gathering in a healthy and productive and Christ-centered, Bible-saturated context, will that ever get to a point to where it produces diminishing returns? I would say probably not, no. But do I think that every church event and every church gathering is perfectly efficient and always productive and always, Christ-centered and always fully Bible-saturated? No, because I think there can be a point in a church where the number of programs becomes too many, that the quality begins to drop off. But if it's high quality church programs, I'd say, man, just go for all you can eat.
Okay, let me push a little bit.
Okay.
Then. Is there a time? I'll say this. I think there's a time. I'll stop doing my postmodern questions.
Okay.
I think there is a time when you can be with Christians too much in
Okay.
that you're not anymore
Doing evangelism.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, is that healthy? No. So that
Okay,
you
yeah,
described
okay.
healthy though.
Yeah.
But there's a point
would
when you
agree with
say
that.
I'm insulated in a Christian subculture.
If you're at the church 24/7, having
Yeah.
sleepovers there and
Yeah.
never leaving.
You just go from the
Yeah.
prayer room to the worship service
Right.
to the Bible study, and you just keep moving.
Rinse
And
and repeat,
Then
yeah.
you have fried chicken in the fellowship hall. That's
good.
Yeah. It sounds good, but there is a point where you have to go actually live this thing
Yeah,
out
I agree.
in real life amongst lost people. So I think there is a time when it's too much. Now, here's what I want to. I thought of a real life example for me. When I was, this would be true for everybody that moved to Colorado with our church planting team. All of us experienced this because all of us came from the South and from church culture. Many of us from Kirby Woods, but some from Florida, South Carolina, Alabama. So we all converged on Colorado, Fort Collins, having come from our church cultures, and all of us were the most active in our churches. So if you think about just me, Jared, what I was doing at the time, as a Kirby member, an intern, and an active seminary person, I mean, there was weeks when I would go to I would go to Bible study, Sunday school. I would then go to church service at 10:30. We would come back in the afternoon and do Sunday evening service. And then we would have chapel at seminary 2 times a week, 2 sermons. I would have Wednesday nights. I would do both the youth and the college. I would go from one because they were staggered at the time. So I'd go play music at one and then go downstairs to the next, hear 2 more sermons then on Wednesday nights. And then many weeks there would be some other opportunity, the mission or, this other, practical mission kind of place to go to and do that. And so on any given week, I counted it up one time. I was hearing like 9 sermons a week and having a lot of fellowship and good things like that. So I was in full church mode. And every time the church had something, I was there. Went to plant a church in Colorado and experienced true withdrawals. And everybody on our church planting team said the same thing, because like you're in a system that's made. It's like it's a machine. You just plug yourself into the machine and it's designed to form you. And so you really don't have to think about your own spiritual development that much when you're in the machine that the church world is made for you. You just shuffle to the next time slot and it happens to you. And so a lot of missionaries go through this, church planters. You get out there and you're like, man, there's no church. I've got to start the church. Me and my 12 friends are the church. Wow. And we don't have, the monster, the machine behind us. We're not going to do 12 sermons a week.
Right.
Nor should we in that point. So, I just remember being in that time of life and thinking this might have uncovered something that was maybe a little unhealthy. Like we were too dependent upon the system.
Okay.
Because I think it taught us not to have to go out and fish for ourselves. If you're the guy on the street corner, to harken back to our Jeff Patrick discussion a couple episodes ago, if you're the guy on the street corner that's handed a gift or food or, $1, that's going to diminish your drive to go out and get a job and earn. So I think there's some similarities to that in church world, where if all you do is know how to eat pre-prepared food, you never learn how to cook.
Yeah,
that's good. Good illustration.
That's good.
I could tell you like that one. That was on the spot.
I felt that.
But I think that's true though, because would you agree there is value in the Christian life in learning how to cook your own food?
Oh, definitely. I don't know. And even those who are involved, you think about, so if you are in that machine and you're constantly being fed, you even think about those who are in leadership. How are they being able to lead this? It's not because your pastors and your different ministers in the church. It's not because they're being fed and they're just regurgitating it to you. It's because they're going in their own personal time and getting this stuff ready to feed to you.
Right.
So I think the hope there, and I'm sure you would agree with this, of every pastor or minister of the gospel, is that through the teaching of the word and the feeding of the sheep, that they then have the desire and maybe even the tools or the outline necessarily to go and do it themselves. Like they say, oh, like I see what he did in that sermon. I see he connected. Oh, he took that from that verse, and 3 verses later it says, and it references back, and they can go in their own personal life and say, I can do this with the word myself. So I definitely think, it's kind of like I'm going to get fed and sit back on the couch instead of I'm going to get fed and use that energy to go get stronger.
Yeah. That word that I like to use over and over again, it's the second most important 5-letter word in the Bible. Probably Jesus would be number 1. But is that right? 5?
Yeah.
Okay,
5.
Good. Just making sure. You were counting on your fingers over there. Equip. That you're equipped to be, the goal is not, I need to rail on something that it's a problem in every established church I've ever been to, especially, and here's the problem, the better the preaching is, the more real the threat is, okay? Yeah. So we're in Memphis, we're at Kirby Woods. There's been good preachers here.
There has.
So
there is.
Yeah. So, you think back just to the pastors that have been here, and you think back to who's been in Memphis, Adrian Rogers rings a bell. Lots of great preachers have been in Memphis. The more talented and gifted someone is at the art of preaching, the more likely you are to have people gathered for entertainment at that church, and to see and Christians will see sermons the same way we see movies. Like when you go to a movie and you sit at that movie and it's great. You're enjoying it. It's got a flow. It's got a plot line. It's got a start and a conclusion. You might cry. You might laugh. It's a full experience. You've sat through sermons from people that can do that, really good preachers, and I'm glad that they do, can craft sermons that way that take you on that ride. But sometimes what happens is you end up having a crowd of people that are primarily there to be entertained, albeit Christian, wholesome entertainment. They're not bad people. They've just come because this beats being at home, and this is good stuff, but there's a difference between listening to preaching for entertainment, because that's what you do in the subculture bubble, versus listening to preaching for equipping to be able to go out and reproduce, or to do this again, or to live differently, in some tangible way. So here, I'm going to use your example, because you set me on the tee a moment ago with food. Okay. So what's a person called that eats too much? The Bible word.
A glutton.
Okay, that's the Bible word, right? So what that means is you have taken into your belly more than what your body needs to function. So you've got an overabundance of food coming in, and your body turns it into fat. It goes to your stomach or wherever else, and it's unnecessary abundance that doesn't get used. That's a glutton. Now, what do we call that in church world when someone takes in way more than what they need and they don't ever use it?
I don't know.
That's the moral of the story is, I think that's what James calls being a hearer of the word, right?
And not a doer. Right?
Yeah. Because basically what he's describing is a spiritual glutton, I think, in that situation. When you accept, I don't know if the early church had this struggle or not, whether they had to deal with people gathering to hear Paul preach for the creative aesthetic of it, like, wow, this is so great. I want to be here for this.
And I think we could say perhaps they did, because otherwise they wouldn't have reason to provide those verses to the churches they're writing to about be a doer, not a hearer.
Yeah, they said that for a reason.
He's like, I've heard of I know some of you guys.
Yeah. So that's, I guess, a caution that I have for anybody listening, is that you never want to get to a point where you're primarily at church because it entertains you in a Christian way. It needs to be an equipping center. And also, I would say you need to learn how to feed yourself. That needs to be a serious priority, because it's not guaranteed that you're always going to live in this bubble, or that we're going to live in in a government or an environment that allows this level of freedom. You have to think about what could happen and what you need to be able to do. I mean, if it's right to have a stockpile of canned goods in your garage because you don't know what's going to happen, then it's just as right to say, man, I need to be able to do my own devotionals at least and know how to feed myself if things get bad.
And even continuing the analogy of food, I think about, so, typically, like, let's say the average, calorie suggesting, I think they always said 2,000, which depends on how, tall the person is, how big the person is, et cetera.
Food pyramid.
Yeah. All that fun stuff. But if you think about, so if someone, let's say, throw a number out there, if someone ate 8,000 calories a day, we would say, 9 times out of 10, that person's, probably a glutton, probably, needs to get some exercise or cut back on their diet. Yeah. But then you think about the strongmen, you think about like these like Eddie Hall type guys who are these massive, bodybuilders and strongmen. So I think there's even an aspect to where maybe it's too much for one person, but not for another. And that's, hinges on their personal life. There's one person who takes and soaks, and then there's the other person, like you said, who takes and uses it to be equipped to go become even stronger in their faith.
Yeah. Well, think about the strongman. The reason weightlifters eat so much is because they're expending that much in calories. So you have to put it back into your body. Right. So I think that's a good illustration because there's usually 2 times in life when you need that high level of content. One is when you're putting out that much. And then secondly is when you just come in malnourished and you're weak and you just need a time of taking in. Right. Somebody hasn't eaten or drank anything for a week, they're coming in on a stretcher, there's a time to sit and soak. And so there are people that are in that season of life and spiritually that's where you're at. But you do need to be able at some point to get off the couch and put the serving ladle in your hand and stand in the service line and be a functioning part of the body, using your gifts and not being dependent on the machine to feed you, that you want to be able to go, hunt yourself.
Yeah, there was, I wish I could remember his name. I know his last name was Para, but he was a missionary who came and spoke at chapel on Tuesday at Mid-America. And I think this is a temptation not only for, the pew sitter who takes in, I think it can also be hard for the person who maybe is getting a healthy amount and is putting it out, as the temptation to sit even more and be able to fight off that temptation. Because the speaker on Tuesday was talking about how he loves to study. Some people hate studying. Some people hate studying theology, reading, reading articles, listening to sermons and people talk, etc. He said he loves it. But the problem is that if he allowed himself to sit there and study all the time, though it would be a good thing to study, it's good to study the Word of God. He said that he would sit there and he would never go out on mission. And his whole charge, he was one of the most passionate guys I've ever heard. It was awesome. But his whole charge was the time for missions is now. Like, it's not like, let me prepare and then go out on mission, or let me prepare and then go overseas, or like, you need to be doing missions now in your daily life. And he said, for seminary students, for pastors, for many of lay people in the church who are just really passionate about God's word, the time to apply it is now. That doesn't mean that we should stop being fed or that we should, be fed even more, but have a balance of both being fed and putting out. And I think that can, just what we're talking about, that can be such a difficult thing to balance in life, as it is with anything else in life. How do you balance spending time in this category and that category when they can both be good things? There's just so much to unwrap.
Yep. Well, this much I know, and I'll close on this, is that the sum of the Christian life cannot be sitting in a church service, looking at a preacher or listening. It has to be a combination of being fed, yes, being encouraged, yes, but also encouraging others, also being on mission and sharing the gospel out loud with other people, getting up, serving, using your spiritual gifts within the context of the body that you're in. And I think you need... One problem that we uncovered, especially in ourselves in Colorado church planting, was most people are poor at evangelism, not because they don't know what to say. It's because they have no one to say it to in their life. They don't have any lost friends that they could even fathom, getting a coffee chat with, getting them to meet up at Starbucks. And it's just, you get so far into the bubble and you look up and think, how did I ever get here? And I think that can be a result of being too entrenched in the machine and not, and seeing preaching not as equipping, but as entertainment. So I think that's a good caution for everybody. It's something I thought about this week and wanted to share with you guys, the listeners. Thanks for listening. Please, if you got any additional things you want us to talk about on the podcast, if you have someone you'd like to see us interview, anything like that, email pastor@kirbywoods.org, and I will do my best to make that a part of what we're talking about. God bless. Come to Kirby Woods on Sunday morning. Going to be a good sermon, I hear. Little birdie told me. Love you guys. Thanks for listening. God bless.